Welcome to our co-creator blast number 6, where we are going to be enamoring the users. And I am glad to welcome you. So who are we and what in the world is this blast? So I'm Elizabeth Lemke. I am the Chief Talent Navigator at Transforming Talent, basically a people and culture consulting. And I'm joined by my lovely friend, Anne-Cécile Graba, who is an intercultural organizational development coach and facilitator. And so to dive in, so enamoring users, how does that fit in? So, and I said that we're on the 6th, meaning we have 5 previous blasts. And in these previous blasts, we went into topics like what is co-creator space, no pain, no gain. Luck, did you know? Talking about a little bit of the facts behind the social research. Well, hi, Jan. Good to see you. Adapt and thrive rather than just survive. Being a learning fool was our last one. And so those were really the foundational principles around what does this mean to be a co-creator and go into that space where you can really drive different adaptable solutions with others. We see it as a basis for evolution in terms of how things work, but also looking at how do you create a good foundation for innovation. And so today we are going to be focusing in on something very specific. We're going to be looking at how do we, and please my French friend.
Yes, how do we enamor user? Because it's not hammering the user, but enamoring, you know, with love. How do we make them us our products and our services?
Exactly. And so what lies behind that real need? You know, here, this is that piece there. We were talking about some good examples.
And so we had really the question, what is the need that is behind the users? And so we thought about at least 2 examples, and the first one is about diapers, and you may be like, what? Diapers? What is that about? When you buy diapers for your baby, he is the user's user, and you are the buying the diapers for your baby. So that's the question of what is really needed when you buy diapers. Who do you have to think about when you buy or when you produce diapers? You need to think about the user, so the baby, but at the same time, the user who's the buyer, the parent. And the other example we had was, what do we really want when it comes to our green grass in the garden? Do we want a lawnmower, or would we prefer to have a grass that grows 5 centimeters high and doesn't go higher? I guess I would prefer to avoid the work of using the lawnmower. And so that's what we wanted to show with this user. It is what is the real need, what is the real thing that is required from the final user. What would be the perfect world? A world without having to mow the lawn, and a world where the baby doesn't need a diaper. That would be awesome too. Doesn't exist.
Make it a little bit in the fear category, but yes, absolutely. But to take that further, if we think about it in other things, you know, for example, HR onboarding. I don't know how many onboarding programs I've seen in my career within HR, but I think that's one of the real problems, because it addresses, you know, here, is it just HR looking for the checklist? Is it a manager that he or she can say, okay, my person's been integrated? Or is a person's onboarding going beyond? Is it really the team having a highly effective person who's integrated into that team? Isn't that the user's user? So as we look to, it's this piece to say, you have to think beyond. You know, we got caught in it. We started to talk about the customer. And then we noticed that we were tripping ourselves up, because at the end of the day, the customer is fostering, or they're selling something to someone else because that fits a need. And so how do we, at the end of the day, when we're looking at innovation, when we're looking at how can things evolve, how are we focusing on what are those underlying needs and addressing those, rather than just staying in the paradigms around what we've known to work, okay? Yeah. And so as we look to the world changing as it is, you know, at some point within the next 6 months to the next 2 years, it's going to be that re-entry shock around what is the new normal? How do we enter into this new place? So that's why looking at how are we really understanding what those underlying needs are is really very pertinent as to how do we continue to move forward.
Yeah.
And so there's a particular song that that fits with focusing on enamoring the users, and it is an old one, an oldie but goodie, but it is Everybody Wants You from Billy Squier. And yes, this is older than me, but doesn't mean I can't appreciate it. Okay, and you'll see it comes from a little bit of a different angle. And so the lyrics are, is you crave attention, you can never say no. Throw your affection any way the wind blows. You always make it, you're on top of the scene, you sell like the copy of a cover of a magazine. Pulling on the eyes till there's nobody else, you never realize what you do to yourself. The things that they see make the daily reviews, you never get free when everybody wants you. Everyone knows you, everyone snows you, everyone needs you, leads you, leads you. So this is the piece to say, how often are we chasing after that Band-Aid? How often are we, you know, this is one of the things about a lot of startups. They go after something that's irritating a broad group of people. And they build up their services, they build up their product around one specific problem. And then when they resolve the problem, it's always a question, okay, now what do we need you for? Or what else can you do? What's next? And so this is that piece, is focusing on the symptom rather than what's the underlying need, and how can you really help there by understanding what is it that you're trying to accomplish. So here, Billy Squier, Everybody Wants You, is that perfect thing to say. Don't let it bleed you out. Don't let your energy go into a space where it's not going to be regenerative, to say, okay, what's that sustainable piece? How are you really resolving the core issues and the problems?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, the fascinating thing about thinking about the user's user is that you also have to think about yourself, otherwise you bleed yourself out and doesn't work. And it's sadly very difficult to really look at what's the real problem. When we think about the first cars, when people were asked what they wanted, they said, I want a faster horse. So if you did not understand that they just wanted a faster transportation system, the car would probably never come to life. And so what are the needs that we see in our clients right now, or people, or the world, that we can solve, because we also need the skills for it?
Yep.
And how do we make sure it's not a pain that comes from one symptom, but the pain comes from a deeper need? And I think it's always about the needs. And people love you when you understand their needs and you're able to help them fulfill those needs. And so that's the game, or the game.
Perfect. Okay, and so that's that piece to say, how do we make sure that we're not confusing the interest of a stakeholder with the shareholders, nor the users, nor the employees? So these are all very different roles. And so it's really about piece to say, how do we do that perspective building to really understand what we're looking for? And so here, as those of you who have watched us before know, there's always social research, which is the base of co-creator.space. It can't be any other way. One thing that we're going to start off with, and Cecile's going to take us through, is really what's the core foundation.
Yeah, and human-centered design is a process, iterative process of discovering what the user really needs. And you start with empathizing with the situation. What is your daily life? How does it look like? What are the things you want to do in your, to achieve while doing the things you do? What is the real pain? When you say, oh, I want to eat healthy, what do you mean by that? What is behind the healthy eating that you're thriving for? We want to understand the audience, or the people who we want to serve. And when we understood, and without judging, like just saying this and this seems to be what they really want, and we thought they wanted to eat healthy, but at the end of the day they just want to eat, Okay, that's also something possible.
Apparently they don't want to get larger. They want their pants still to fit.
Yeah, somehow, even after the Corona crisis, everyone wants to be fit, you know, and be like, I'm able to wear the same clothes than before. Yes, yes, yes. How do we do that? And so the first phase is really to be empathic with the people and really try to understand the situation from their perspective and not from ours as product developer or service developer. And then we need to define what is exactly the thing that they need. What can we do about it? How could we define that? This need in a sentence or maybe two if the need is very complex. And then we start, the third step is to ideate. We start to have crazy ideas. And what if we had no problem with time, with money, everything was possible? What would we create? And the answer could be, well, we would create diapers that you don't need to change, like something like this, like coming back to our lovely example. Or we'll have green grass that grows 5 centimeters and that cuts itself after the 5th centimeter and doesn't grow more than that, or something else. I don't know. I have no, like my ideation right now is level 0. So that's what you would do. You have many ideas and you just let yourself be creative and sometimes crazy to see what is possible. And then you look at all those ideas and your fourth step is to prototype and say, okay, what can we do with all those ideas? Let's try something. And you do something simple and you just show it then in the last phase to your lovely audience and you say, hey, what do you think about what we just created? And they have the right to criticize and say, I'm not going to use that. And you listen to the critics and to the positive feedbacks to come back to the situation where you're like, okay, we have feedbacks, and then we start all over again. Did we really understand the situation? Is the definition of what we thought was right still the right definition? Blah, blah, blah. And then you go it and you do it with your customer or your user in our case.
And one of the key things about the human-centered design within the co-creator space is, you know, not waiting until the end to prototype, but really saying, who would Google this, this question? Who would Google this status quo in terms of being part of that solution finding? And it is this piece of, there's a great way to say it in German, Betroffene zu Beteiligten, which basically means the people who are affected by it, they're the ones who are involved in creating the solutions. Yeah. So this is that piece to say, taking the human-centered design, or basically design thinking, but then also saying, you know, as we look to what are the problems to be solved, etc., how do we use this process, but also making sure that the people who have a unique, different, and a point of view, as well as a couple of wild birds in there, that process for creating adaptable solutions is really based around that.
Yeah, and really that's basically the idea, like centered, human-centered design is really the fact that we look at every possible angles, the same situation, taking basically the person who needs the stuff that we are creating. And that's, yeah, the real focus is on the humans, not on the process, not on the potential ideas that you may have. It's about the humans that are going to be using your service or product.
Yep. And what we honestly like to say at Co-Creator Space is never fall in love with your product or service.
And when you start to fall in love,
make sure your ideas are dateable.
Yeah, make sure that someone else would like it, huh? And so when we consider that, we also said that we need to think about the jobs to be done, because without that, we fail.
Yeah.
And that was your part, your research.
Exactly. So yes, we have one of the co-captains is famous for cross-researching and exactly. So here, when we're talking about enamoring the user, something that you may be familiar with is the idea of the jobs to be done, which is, you know, really understanding the why behind the product development. So here, it's like, why would a customer value your product? What are they looking for? So the product is essentially the brand, meaning this is very similar to employer branding. The employer brand is not what marketing says it is. Your product is not what marketing says it is. It's what they say it is. So whoever your customer is, whoever your employees are, whoever experiences you, they're the ones behind your brand. Okay, so this is that piece to say, it's really about, you know, what's that job? What's the experience that I have when I'm interacting? And that really makes the difference. And so it's this piece to say, why are we doing this? What is, you know, what is the thing that we're looking to resolve? What's the experience? And then how does it actually work? So if we were to go a level up and say, okay, what's the job to be done? We're going to play a little game. Okay, Jan, I see you're here, and I'm gonna tag you out. All right, so the idea is that we have jobs to be done, and there can be old solutions that we're used to, but there can be also new solutions. So we're gonna just play with a couple of ideas. So the jobs to be done is you have to ingest medicine. So you have to take your medicine, okay? So what are some old ways? Some old ways are maybe we get a shot. Very simple. Babies don't like it. Yep, exactly.
No one likes it.
We have to take a bitter pill. What are some new solutions? New solutions could be kind of like, you know, I was really surprised when they came out a few years ago with the patches of nicotine for smokers.
Yeah.
So you could take it via your skin, or there's now, you know, there's breathables. But if we were also just think about what are different ways to ingest medicine, what else?
Well, we could change the DNA of people so that they don't need the medicine anymore, you know?
Nice. Yeah, true enough. Exactly. And we could change their DNA by introducing virus, or we could, you know, maybe we could do something else by we could also put a little like tube in their neck that injects it. We could change the food. We could enrich, you know, like the toothpaste with the rich fluoride.
Your clothes could have the medication in it. You know, you soak your clothes in medication, you wear it all day, and after 3 days you're not ill anymore. That would be something too. Yeah.
Perfect. And so these are all examples. And for example, with the clothes, is you don't have to go to the doctor's office, so there's less hassle. Here you have it, your clothes dissolve, so you know that, you know, you don't have to wash them, so they're gone. And then here you've had your medicine, and then after 3 days, you know, if you're continuing on with symptoms, then that would be a warning. So
yep.
Ja, natürlich.
Hello, Jana.
Jana, good to have you here. So this is that piece to say jobs to be done. It can be very simple. So here, so one of the things could be to say, let me think of another one. So, okay, I'll just stay with clean teeth. How could we clean our teeth? So what was the old solution? So Jana, any ideas about the old solution about how we used to keep our teeth clean?
And you can write a comment. I don't know how, because I don't know how it looks like, but somewhere at the bottom.
So I remember, like, when I was a little kid, my mom, like, teaching me how to brush my teeth. I only wanted to brush these two because that didn't hurt. But now there could be some different ideas about how we brush our teeth. We have these weird automatic toothbrushes. We could do it, you know, like dogs. Dogs have a dog treat that they chew on it, and
that would be something, yeah.
Yeah, so it helps them make sure. We could use sound waves, so it could break up the tartar, and, you know, it could be an addition to Spotify, you know.
Listen to music, and while you listen to music, you make, why not?
So as you see, it's very simple to just kind of say, okay, what is the underlying need? So my husband and your fiance, they're very clear about that we need clean teeth, but how we get there, that's where we can get creative. So this is why when we're talking about enamoring the user, it really is that piece to say, well, what's really underlying that need? Because quite often where the original solutions that we're used to, they started from that point. So the inventions at some point were that piece to say, based upon what we have available and the ideas that we have flowing, what could be a good solution? And as we look to how things progress and how we need to change, and as we look to how are we nimble and adaptive, it's how we're also putting things into questions. And so that's one thing that's been very interesting, is that right now a lot of people are putting into question how we run organizations, you know, that the process dictated things rather than what is the intention or what is the customer actually needs. Right now it's an interesting space to be in. It was said, you know, that HR has changed in the past 20 days more than it's changed in the last 20 years.
I'm not surprised.
There's also a lot of good energy around this co-creation as to when we're given that chance, what are the things that are impeding us, and how can we look for different solutions as we get to that. Okay, so to perhaps kind of give you a couple of just things to chew on, just to take it a little bit easier, is if we were looking at 3 questions, and we're going to focus them in on managers. I'm going to ask you 3 different questions and ask, is there a different answer to each one? So the first question would be, what do you expect of all managers? What should all managers do? Okay, so just write it on something in front of you, or write it in the comments section. What should all managers do? What do you expect of them? Okay, next question. What do you expect of your manager? Okay, so even if you are your own manager, what do you expect of you? Okay, so what do you expect of your manager? Okay. All right, third question is, tell me about the best manager you ever had. Okay, what did he or she do? Okay, so think about those 3 questions. The first one is, what do you expect of all managers? What do you expect of your manager? And then tell me about the best manager you ever had. Now, question, did you think the exact same thing for all 3 questions, or do you think differently? So I'm actually taking this from a friend of mine, Steve Arntz, who worked at Instructure, and he did design thinking when they were looking at what is that coaching ability of managers. And they found out there were three very different expectations or answers when they asked these questions to, I think, about 7,000 people. So the first one, what do you expect of all managers, was alignment and results. Okay, so tell me where we're going and how are we getting those results together. The second one of what do you expect of your manager was career growth and support. Okay, so help me grow in what I'm doing now, but also give me the support, have my back, but also help and encourage me. The third one, tell me about the best manager you ever had, was interesting because this conversation went a very different direction. And this conversation was really about the relationship that the person had together with that best manager and the connections that followed them. So this is the pieces. You can have a very simple question, but depending upon how you ask it, you can get very different answers, because here, if we were just to say, what do you expect of managers, you get a different perspective. And so this is why it's really taking it out of that perspective. What is a user? And how are you looking at that? What is that underlying need? And then helping tend to those. And then Anne-Cecile, you had a different one for change management.
Yes, I thought of a few questions we could ask ourselves when we think about change management, trying to go through the same kind of eye-opening moment. And so the first question would be, what do you want from your change management effort? Simple as that. Then what do you expect from your role and the one of others in the change effort? What do you expect people to be doing? What do you expect yourself to be doing in this change effort? And then the last question is, what is the best change management effort that could ever happen? I think I meant something different. What is the best change management effort for you? So how does it look like? That was the question behind. And I had my guess, and that's me being crazy. And I said, well, I guess people would prefer not to have change management processes. They would like that it's natural and that change just happens, you know, not without having us to think about it. All the optimal things would be done. And it's not the case. So we need to work on what do we really want in this change.
Yep, very good. So, and that's the piece to say, as we look to how do you really go for those things that the real needs that lie at the core, this is what you're designing for. So you're not only looking at how folks interact with the current product or what they challenge, what challenges they have with the current offerings. Oh, hi, Gabriel. So we have Brazil on the line, also good. I love it. Oi. So this is why when we're looking at enamoring the users, there's some things you have to think about. The first one is perception is reality. So here is, what do you want? What is that piece that really lies at the core? So it's that piece to say, how do we sell, and they say here, we don't have countries, we sell hope. So what is that perception? So are you really caring? Are you really showing up? Do you really look at what your users needs? The second one is really, and this is what Anne Cecile was talking about when she was talking about human-centered design, is that piece around practicing empathy. And empathy is very different to sympathy. So empathy is really feeling with someone and really understanding where they're coming from. You know, here, you or a manager or an entrepreneur are not the customer, okay? So sometimes customers have real reasons behind their ideas that are quasi-rational. They're not very rational. And so this is that piece of having to dive in differently. So here it's this piece to really dig in deeper rather than assuming you know, really grabbing in a little bit deeper. Products are also ecologies. So here it's not just the 5 whys and the 1 how. That's really looking at how are people intending to use it, what are the effects, and what does that have in terms of also moving it forward. And that also helps you think about, are there other ways to go about it, okay? The fourth one is never forget the emotional value and in the economic offering. So, okay, so this exactly like what Anne Cecile said. I don't care if you have KPIs. I don't care if you have it objected. Everything is always subjective when you're dealing with people. Okay, so this is that piece to say, how do we really understand that there is an emotional as well as an economic value? And how do we scratch that out so that it is really comes to the surface and it's not just in the back of someone's mind, but that it's something that we're very intent with a lot of intention in terms of how we approach. The price may actually be a small part of a customer's concerns because of hidden costs. And so this is something I would always argue with my CFO. I would say, we're always talking about cost saving. We need to talk about cost avoidance. What are the things, if we were to make proper investments or looking at some better term solutions, that at the end of the day would actually save us money or have a bigger win? So this is why, for example, in learning, we don't talk about return on investment in learning. We say return on impact. Okay, so return on learning impact. So looking broader, looking at what are we trying to accomplish. It's so funny how just changing a little bit of the wording, but also changing at what kind of factors do you put into that, that really then uncovers what are those hidden costs that perhaps, because they could get nicely put into the balance sheet that we weren't paying attention to. The sixth one, and there are 7, the sixth one is this piece to say Churchill's Law, and Cecile's, I will let you speak to Churchill's Law.
You said something like, what's the problem? Because at the end you're going to die. Like, that's my memory.
Exactly. Churchill was asked, how do you feel about turning 80? And he said, well, I'm fine when I consider the alternative. So this is the piece to say, you know, oftentimes when people are looking at, you know, what really is value to me, it's really about also looking at the alternatives. Hopefully the alternatives are not
That,
the opposite of your A. But it's that piece to say, okay, what are those alternatives that you're looking at and how viable are they? And then also looking at, maybe there's a different balance there. Okay, the second one is really this piece around how are we creating value? And so here, you are always on my mind, like Elvis Presley would say. It's this piece to say, do we understand what value for the user actually look like? So this is that piece to go away from, what we assume it is, but then to actually really go in and say, how are we listening? How are we understanding? How are we observing? And then also including in making different solutions. And so those are the pieces as we look to enamoring the users, what are really our recommendations there.
And we have 4 recommendations after all that we've said. And I think one thing is sure is that you do not skip the discovery phase. You have to have it. You need this time to really understand the core need of your user and the user's user. It's vital. Otherwise, you're going to create something else they may need, and then at some point the need is over, or you're wrong and you discover it too late in the process of creation. So discover first, exchange with your user, make sure that you know what they really, really want or really, really need. Try first to solve for one person first, because it's easier to discuss with one person, understand the need of the person, and then extrapolate, which means I have information about one situation, and then what would that mean for someone else? How could we implement that for other people? Knowing that the needs that we have are universal. So if someone needs something, there is a chance that someone else needs the same thing.
And I think one of the other challenges here, I'll just take it back for talent management. So for example, the reason why we say solve for one person first is it used to be, this needs to be a high potential program across multiple regions, and it's too broad. And it's this piece, there's a lot of assumptions that happen when you say for all plant managers, for all high potentials. But if you say, okay, I'm looking specifically at a software engineer based out of Piracicaba. What are the things, here he has 2 kids in a family. What are the things that we're thinking about? Okay, so it's a very different scenario where you get specific, but you also get much better solutions because you're solving it for one person first and you're involved in it. And so this is that piece. It goes away from these blanket assumptions that will hopefully help to this piece to say, how do we refine it so that it actually can help?
And that's really the idea of working with one person and then coming back to the meta-ebene or the overview, and then looking at what we can do with others and see how to connect all that in one thing. And that's, I think, where we say for the third advice or recommendation, do things that do not scale. Please stop with this craziness of scaling. Scaling to whom? Like that's the craziness of any startups. They want to grow and scale. But if you scale to everyone, you scale to no one. Like that's also the thing. You need to understand who are the people you really need to help and how to help them. And maybe when you do your work correctly and you have this exchange, this human-centered design approach, then you have a chance to create something that other people may see as valuable, and then it will scale on its own because others recognize the usefulness for others. Hello. So we do cooking.
Exactly. So, and I think, and to that piece around the scaling is also, I was on a brain trust call, which Bill was also on, and it was said very well. Instead of talking about minimal viable product, which we oftentimes hear when we're talking about agile teams and design, it's most valuable product. And I thought that was really good. It's a very different paradigm as to what you think about when you're talking about value rather than just getting it out there. Okay, so
yeah. I think it's a great idea because it really changes the way then you approach the iteration. And it's not, we just have to have something out so that it's out, but we have to create value. Awesome. I love it. I'm going to keep it. And we have 4 recommendations. So let me go to the last one. And what we said is that we have to think about what is at the core. not just the symptom of we've always done that this way, but what is the thing that we are trying to solve? What is the real problem? What is the root? And not the appearance symptoms, because looking at symptoms is always easy. The hardcore work is to exchange with people, ask questions, open up the discussion, make sure that we look at the same thing from different perspectives so that we get an overview of what the situation is and could be from different perspectives. And then going through the process of talking with the user. And so that were our 4 recommendations. Do not skip discovery, solve for one person first, do not scale, don't think about that, forget about that, and think about what's at the core of the problem. And then you should be good.
Yeah.
And so you wrote that we can have, like, we're at the end of the blast for now, and you can ask any questions or share your thoughts with us. So we are ready to listen.
Exactly. And I'm so happy that I have at least 3 of my friends here on the line, or our friends. So, yay. So, so this is that piece to say, you know, here, when we were talking about co-creator, you know, kind of principles, I'm in the speaker's choir. I love it. I love it. So this is that piece to say, when we're talking about enamoring the user, it has to start with desire. So oftentimes when we're looking at these things, it comes with the knowledge or the skills, etc. And so this really goes back to that initial principle about co-creator space is how do we start with the desire of what's really at that need.
Mm-hmm.
The next one, when we're talking about, you know, how does this also fit in is you know, we say it has to be social, it has to be adaptive, and it's always personal. So this piece to say, you know, what's in it for me, what's in it for us, those are those pieces to say, how do we look at it through a different lens? Because it's really that piece around value creation in a volatile world is what would that user actually value? You know, there's a lot of things being thrown, a lot of band-aids being addressed, but you know, what would people actually be thankful and grateful that you're offering? What's a real help? I think one thing that we've been talking about is that right now there's a real reaction to don't sell me anything. And I totally agree with it. You know, it's that piece of moving far away from the transactional and saying, okay, what's that, you know, how can you help and support me? So this is that piece of those traditional transactional approaches really aren't hitting the grain.
Yeah.
The other piece that we kind of talk about is that not everything has to be an innovation. I think that's something that, you know, when we're looking at users, oftentimes it's just very, very simple things. And so how can we evolve and really help people to say, what is your agency? What is your ability to change the things that, you know, in terms of your environment, what can you influence and what would make a difference? And right now, seemingly, this is getting a lot of energy. So a lot of things that we're stuck or we're never going to be able to change that, people have been able to make some changes. So how can we continue to carry that forward? Yeah. The last one we talk about, particularly with enamoring the users, is making sure we don't bend people to check. Ooh, I like it. The transformation has longer term impact. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what you're looking for. And that's the piece around here, the all in, the brave space. In one of the previous blasts, we said, you know, how do we compare co-creation? Co-creation is like a scavenger hunt. Everyone's all in. Those different
ideas. And you create,
exactly,
and you make sure that you take everyone, that you get to the point where you can open the door and you're safe.
Yes, exactly. So this is that piece to say, making sure that we're not dictated by the technology that we're using, but to say, okay, how is technology working for people, and how are we really looking at what is an augmentation in terms of really that piece? And so these are, as we're looking at what is really a value creation for a users, those are the thoughts that we address and what we look at when we're looking at co-creator space. Yep, and it absolutely aligns with the exponential design model. Exactly. I love it. I love it. Woo. Yay, glad you guys were here. All right, I love it.
Nice.
So we're looking forward to you guys definitely coming into our next blast, which we're going to be having on May 19th.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, when we're going to be looking at how are we centering on why. So that's going to be at 6 p.m. Paris time, which is 9 a.m. Portland time, and I believe in Eastern time. Bill, you got to help me out there. So this is that piece to say, we love that you guys are here. We're just doing these blasts to kind of carry out some of the ideas as to what's behind co-creator space. What can it mean for teams? What can it mean for organizations, particularly as we look to adaptability and finding better solutions. You can find our previous blast on
co-creator.space under the events.
Perfect. All right, so that's our website. We're also on exactly 12 o'clock Eastern. Thank you, Bill. And co-creator space is also on YouTube, where you can find also our previous videos. Thank you, my love.
Yeah. We are also on LinkedIn.
Exactly, we're also on LinkedIn. Okay.
Professionally with us, you can.
Exactly. So wonderful. Well, thank you so much. So this is Elizabeth Lemke signing off. Appreciate it. Thanks so much for coming in.
And we'll see you later, probably for some of you. And I'm Anne-Cécile Graeber, and we will meet again in 2 weeks.
Perfect. See you.
Bye-bye, everyone. Have a good evening or a good afternoon or whatever it is for you. Bye-bye.
Bye.